Welcome to the Sourcing Industry Landscape podcast, hosted by Dawn Tura, CEO and President of SIG.
Well, hello, folks. Welcome back to the podcast series. My name is Dawn Tura, and I am so excited to have two guests in our studio today. First off is Brian Roche, who has become just a huge SIG advocate and a dear friend. He's the Chief Procurement Officer at Westfield Group. And Brian is responsible for Westfield's enterprise procurement function, which includes the development and execution of source-to-pay programs, including category management, third-party risk management, operational procurement, and process automation. Now, prior to joining Westfield, he was with Citizens Bank, where he had a variety of leadership roles. And then he also was with KeyBank National Association as well as Senior Sourcing Strategist and Vice President. Over 20 years of procurement experience. But one of the things that I think that you're going to really enjoy getting to know Brian is that he's approachable, he's humble, he's a great leader. And Westfield Insurance, if you don't know, is one of the nation's 50 largest property and casualty insurance groups, representing a network of more than 900 independent insurance companies. Westfield provides commercial insurance in 21 states, personal insurance in 10 states, and surety services to customers in 50 states. So, wow, welcome to the studio, Brian. It's so exciting to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Don. I appreciate it. Looking forward to the opportunity to connect again and spend some time talking about what we've been doing over the last several months, and here to close out 2021 and look forward to some things we're doing in 22.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear that. And joining you today is Zach Engels. Now, oh, sorry, you Zach or Zachary?
Zach.
Zach, okay. He's the Procurement Operations Leader at Westfield, and your responsibilities include developing and maintaining the buying channel strategy and process guidelines while managing day-to-day actions of the procurement operations team. You're also responsible for the implementation, administration, and oversight of all procurement technology at Westfield, specifically those applications in the source-to-pay lifecycle and their integration with the other Westfield systems, including ERP. You also oversee staff responsibilities for monitoring contract to invoice compliance and other key KPIs for the department, and demonstrate a commercial skill set with strong analytical and financial capabilities, advanced negotiation skills, high attention to detail, and the ability to build key stakeholder relationships. So welcome to the studio, Zach.
Thanks, Dawn. Thanks. And I think a better way to put it is if Brian's got an idea or a strategic point that he wants to take our group in, I'm responsible for making sure we get that across the finish line.
That's a great partnership to have right there. So folks, before we get started, we're going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsor and our AI council partner, Zycus. When we return, we're going to hear more from our guests.
Don't you ever wonder why today's procurement has more digitization, yet broken processes? More technology, yet increased manual effort? More features, yet a worse user experience? Today, an agile procurement team needs technology that can address industry-specific use cases, category-specific nuances, and geography-specific regulations. And if you thought customizations was the answer to your problems, they can be hard to implement, difficult to maintain, and can conflict with the core product. What if there was a way to extend your procurement technology instead? Presenting App Extend. With App Extend, you can easily extend your technology with a variety of pre-built Zycus and third-party apps. Seamlessly integrate with other SaaS products, and quickly and easily add new features. Let's have a look at the PO Collaboration app. This app enables seamless collaboration between buyer and supplier at a document level. It is a process-driven app that removes dependency on email and non-traceable documentation, making your PO process faster. With over 100 apps coming out in the next 18 months, Zycus App Extend gives you the flexibility to do more, with less. And if there is a use case you can't find in the App Store, just let us know and we will create a new app for you. Merlin changed the game in 2020, App Extend will change the game in 2022.
Well, welcome back. So Brian and Zach, I have a number of things I want to ask you about, but most importantly, it's about your journey and where you are today. So, Brian, can you give me a little bit of your background and how you got to the office of CPO?
Sure, absolutely, Don. So, as you'd highlighted a little bit at the onset here, I've had a variety of roles in procurement. I'd say probably a good majority of that, maybe 60 to 70% of my time spent in the third-party risk space for financial services. That was really, I think, a key point and part of what my current organization, Westfield Insurance, was looking to improve upon when we started the department back in 2015. So a key sort of first set of activities was we've got some risk issues both internally as far as what internal audit has raised, and those were aligned with what the Federal Reserve Bank had also observed. And so we worked diligently over time to address those. So I think my background and experience in third-party risk was a big a benefit coming into the organization in terms of what the priorities were. But the organization had a strategy to do this, well, let's just say the right way long-term. And when I say the right way, other procurement and sourcing folks will understand exactly what I mean. It isn't just about managing risk. We've got other commercial considerations, and we have efficiencies that we know, especially coming into a fairly manual process within the procurement and related functions at Westfield, to get ourselves in a position where we could be more efficient and leverage some technology down the road. So it was a great opportunity. It's been a lot of fun. The time has flown by. If we can spend a little bit of time today talking about what we're, kind of where we were when I joined, and some of the people and process and technology considerations that we addressed and are implementing and continue to improve with, hopefully, going forward.
Well, it says a lot for Westfield to hire you because of your third-party risk management background, because in 2015, it wasn't the topic du jour that was on everyone's tongue. We recognized it was an issue, but boy, it has become huge now in the procurement organizations to know that the contracts you put in place could literally take down the organization or wreck your reputation or introduce all kinds of risk and steal data, all kinds of things that we really weren't talking about that in 2015. So I applaud you for having that focus early on. But boy, is that the topic of today, is third-party risk management. Yeah,
it sure is. And in thinking back over the years, I'm reaching back a little bit, but around the time of 9/11, when the first, OCC bulletin had come out in that November of 2001, there was, to your point, a little bit of what we might call some, a lull or a of what was expected to be done in third-party risk. And when those bulletins were rescinded and reissued in 2013, it took some time for industry to catch up and understand what they needed to think about and what they needed to do differently relative to how things were done then. And then with, I think the ramp up in technology advancements and how fast things change these days, to your point, the world's different now, and we need to think differently, we need to act differently, we need to leverage technology differently. And so those are all part of the things that make, I think, third-party risk front and center with cyber and cloud applications and hosting. And those are all things that we as an organization are doing, just like a lot of the other members of SIG.
Okay, but you said two things that they're incongruent in my mind. You said you're very manually paper-based, and yet you're third-party risk focus as well. So
right.
Those two, I mein, the first one screams of risk if you're paper-based and not fully automated. So tell me about your digital transformation. What are you doing? Have you had a full digital transformation or transition to a single platform? Where are you in your journey?
We did, yeah. So with Zach's help and expertise, we moved off of, I guess a couple of things. So one of the first things we did when I joined was we got some of those manual processes in a digital on a digital platform. And that was a purpose-built solution that worked very well for what we wanted to do at that point in time. And as we started to evaluate other technology to solve some of the other manual processes that we wanted to address around contracting, and then all of the downstream, rec and PO processes, we thought, well, can we investigate the opportunity to go, the suite route, so to speak, and understanding that if we had purpose-built solutions and integration challenges versus a suite that also came with some intra-suite integration challenges, we were kind of talking about, running into some of the same challenges and opportunities with both. But we decided in the end, based upon the level of complexity, inside the organization and what we thought that ultimately Zycus could offer to us, that was a pretty good option to go the suite route. So as and today, to be clear, we are no longer manual and paper-based in a sense. There are some certain, absolutely manual activities involved in some of the, certainly some of the output and the reporting that we do to understand how compliant the organization is to those processes that we need to be compliant to. But I'm happy to say that we now have connections, if you will, from the contracting and the downstream procurement processes to give us visibility into risk in the supply chain at various points in time, whereby we could get it in the past, but getting it in the past meant I've got to go pull a report from system A. I've got to go talk to somebody to understand what contract this ties to. And then any of the orders that happen downstream, if you think about some of the financial risk of paying twice or other things that can go wrong when you don't have that connectivity, we are in a better position today, ultimately, to continue to address that issue and to solve it for us so that we're not, out of control. And I think those are some of the things that we've done on a technological basis, whether they be purpose-built early on or, where we are today with Zycus on the source-to-pay platform for really a handful of things that are helping us become more automated.
That's awesome. So now you have within Zycus, you have your contracting, your PO, source to pay, all of that is now within Zycus?
We do, yeah. In fact, Zach will keep me honest here, but we've got, we go way back upstream to the front end. We've got the supplier module that's integrated with our ERP system. So we have one source of truth. Supplier master data management was a huge opportunity for us and solves a lot of problems for us in terms of visibility and spend and many of the things that anyone else listening to this call will understand and relate to. We've got the iAnalyze tool, which gives us the analytics that we need. And we are also using, kind of the core suite modules of contracting, risk management and the downstream, rec to PO process. So Zach, have I missed anything?
I was gonna say, it's probably easier to say what we don't subscribe to. We're a full suite customer. The last piece I think that we're still evaluating with our business constituents in AP is the e-invoice module, but everything else that Brian mentioned, saving, sourcing, contracting, e-procurement, and supplier information and performance for the risk portion are all modules that we subscribe to.
So Zach, were you there for this entire journey?
I came in a little bit after Brian. So Brian was, hire number one for the new procurement department. And then I came in probably about a year and a half later. Brian mentioned that they kind of had to sequence and prioritize some of those risk management issues that came up as part of our review with some of our regulators. So I came in about a year and a half later, and my background is actually more manufacturing and CPG based. So I have an LSS background. I'm a green belt. So thankfully, Brian, I think, saw those principles from LSS, and how I could connect kind of the process portion in that people process technology stack that everyone's so focused on.
So huge transformation for your team then, Brian, when I think about it, and Zach, you could probably, share, going from manual to digital frees up so much headspace around that transactional stuff that nobody wants to do. And so can you tell me a little bit about how your team went with you on this journey?
Yeah, absolutely, Zach. I can kick it off. So we when I was looking at the operating model, we were able to secure some talent from the outside that was familiar with the sourcing process and sourcing technologies. And I think getting those people on board with that concept was fairly straightforward. To me, one of the most important things that we could focus on were bringing in people that either understood the business we are in or understand procurement and the supporting technology that's going to make us more efficient. So I would be honest with you, Don, and tell you that things didn't play out exactly the way that we thought they would play out. And I'll give you a specific example. There are some aspects of how we manage the sourcing process where we're leveraging other tools and collaboration sites internally, like Microsoft Teams, for example, in a couple of ways to DEI is a huge initiative, many organizations these days, and another hot topic. So when I think about our diversity and selection and why we do or don't select a supplier who's diverse in one of our RFPs, we're doing a nice job of collaborating with the business and tracking that selection rationale. And we're doing that in places where people are collaborating already. So how do we really take some of those other tools that we have in the organization that are well established in places that people are used to going to and layer it in with, the source to pay technology that we use? So we've kind of a little bit of a hybrid to embrace and not necessarily force people into the technology for the sake of doing it. Now, there are places where we absolutely want to leverage it, and contracting is a great example. And think we've done a great job with Zach's support and others in the organization to transition off of old systems and other disparate things into the Zycus iContract module to really help support meeting the goals and objectives we have as an organization. But what we don't want to do is discount some of the other solutions that the organization leverages for purposes of collaboration and things like that. So I think people were open-minded to doing that, and I think like anything else, change always comes with a little bit of a challenge in getting people to do things differently. But I think, Zach, I think we're in a pretty good place in terms of adoption within the procurement department, and have got really good adoption thanks to Zach and team with the downstream stuff on how people order and how we ultimately, cut POs and pay for things.
Yeah, Don, I think it's interesting. I know it's come up a couple times at SIG in different forums, but is the traditional category manager or procurement staff skills changing? And I think with these digital transformations and the technology, that we've implemented at Westfield, that answer is absolutely yes. We don't need people that are focused solely on negotiating and beating suppliers up over price. We need people that are focused on technology and understand process from end to end, not only their portion of it, but what they're doing, how does that impact, other downstream functions. So we've certainly gone through, I would say, a transformation from an upskilling standpoint as well, where, our category managers and the folks that Brian mentioned that are in our risk module, working digitally and drafting contracts digitally, getting them signed digitally, 100% paperless, touch-free, end-to-end. It's a challenge. And I think what we've done is we've tried to highlight the benefit to them, right? And oftentimes it's a time savings. You're able to view revisions and drafts in one place digitally. You can get that signature digitally. There's no passing back of emails that someone may have printed and marked up a PDF, and now you have to wet sign it and send it back. So being able to realize the time benefit and getting them trained on, hey, it's just a couple clicks. It's pretty easy to actually figure out. So leading with the benefit has certainly gotten us a lot of adoption.
Yeah, and change is hard, but I tell you, everyone I've talked to that's gone through this digital transformation, once they've been through it for a while, they're like, oh my gosh, I would never go back to those manual processes we had before. How cumbersome, how ridiculous was it? So I do applaud you on that. But, you bring up a really good point. Risk management is hard enough, yet alone if you didn't have a contract module to be able to go through and really use the AI and the tools to be able to search all your contracts. So tell me more about what you're doing as far as risk management. How do you measure it? Are you looking at mitigation? Are you looking at risk avoidance? Tell me a little bit about that in your organization.
Sure. So a couple things that come to mind, Dawn. First, we have a lot of the standard component parts that all financial institutions have. Cyber and information security, for as long as I can remember, represent about 75% of the risks. They're usually in the technical control space, right? Business continuity management and disaster recovery, and understanding the technology and business processes that vendors have in place to manage issues should they happen, but also making sure those things are aligned internally with what our business units say are the most core critical functions that they perform. So it's sort of that marriage of, we've got a core business function that is critical to the operation of the insurance company, and this vendor over here is doing something to support that. It's not enough to read their DR plan or their BC plan and say that they've got one. Maybe this is elementary at this point with the more mature organizations, but making that connection back into our company to make sure that we understand where that risk is aligned to the business unit function, and making sure that we've got that connection there. I think those two aspects are the most important aspects, and there are other things that we look at, like compliance risk and financial risk, but primarily we find ourselves, especially given the growth of technology and the movement to cloud, as being the two areas that are most relevant, I think, to create the most risk with a small number of our suppliers, but nonetheless important to do. So what about the rest of the suppliers? Well, we have a metric that Zach created as part of our monitoring and dashboarding and reporting that we do within our organization, and I share with senior management, and that's around risk reviewed spend. So we have a number that says this is the spend that procurement can address in the organization. A lot of work to figure out what that meant for the claims space to bring that in, Well, we got ourselves to a good spot where we've identified what we can influence and address, we believe. But of that number, how much of that has been risk reviewed? And risk reviewed can mean it doesn't have to go fully through the process, or it does, and we've reviewed it to whatever degree is appropriate, taking a risk-based approach. And then thirdly, there may be some things that we are saying are, they were maybe missed as part of the process. So we have an assurance, we go back with tying this risk process again back to spend analytics to demonstrate some of that connectivity is, let's go back and look to see where money was spent, where we think there should have been a risk review and there wasn't one done. And I use risk review generically. So we pull that data in. We have a spend threshold we cut it off at because there's thousands and thousands of transactions under that number. And we're going to, again, not trying to mitigate risk down to zero here, but make sure that we can find where people may have intentionally or otherwise, skip the process. And so we'll bring that in. It's sort of like a retro PO in a sense. I don't know, it's a retro, but better late than never. And let's get them into the process and let's use the opportunity to train and educate people so they understand the paths they're supposed to follow. If our, a category management business aligned function is not going to be perfect, but we think we've done a good job there. Sometimes people do things, roles change over in the business, and we've got a little bit of monitoring and oversight that we do on our own to make sure that we stay connected. So the technology has helped us to do that faster and quicker. We're not going through and having to consolidate a supplier who's listed 20 times because we've got them in multiple systems. Zach's done a nice job of rationalizing all that down so we have a place to go to see at the supplier level whether that supplier's been through the process or not. So those are some of the things that come to mind for me. Really good visibility into the spend base of what we know is addressable. And we've accounted for 100% of what's in that pile. So I can kind of say to, leadership in the organization, we know across all of the areas that procurement operates and helps the business from a commercial perspective and risk perspective, we've addressed all the risk management components that are appropriate for those products and services. And any that we haven't or that we found need to be in compliance, we're out trying to kind of, bird dog those things as we find them.
So Zach, I'd like to ask you then too, with the pandemic and all of a sudden everyone's working from home. I assume that happened to your organization as well. Is that right, Brian and Zach?
Yep,
yeah,
sure.
yeah, we're still at home. Yeah.
So how would you have gotten by without Zycus and without having gone through your digital transformation during a pandemic?
Yeah, I think this is kind of serendipitous timing, similar to Brian being the risk expert, half a decade ago. Our implementation from a downstream e-procurement ordering went live January 2020. And then 5 months later, we found ourselves, everyone working remotely. So our timing couldn't have been better. And actually, I have some graphics on our adoption and our PO volume. And in May, June, and July, there's a huge spike in orders. And that's because when everyone was at home, they're buying ink, toner, office supplies, printers, all the things that were so readily available in an office space. Now everyone needs to outfit their homes. And our digital transformation allowed them to single click in. Our users are created and given access through single sign-on. So they were all already set up in the system. All they had to do was take a quick 10-minute training video and they could punch out to some of our preferred suppliers, get any of the IT peripherals that they needed, monitors, cables, office supplies, and then they check out. And what would have been an extremely manual process, leveraging our ERP system, we would have had to import everyone's home addresses. We would have had to create those manually, batch those from recs to POs, batch those out and email them to suppliers, or we would have had to send everyone corporate cards and get everyone plastic and have them transacting, online, which opens you up to a lot of risk. But instead, they key in their home address. We set up CXML ordering. So it's a business to business connection, very secure. And then all those items just ship out to people's homes. And on the back end, we have ghost cards or P cards, or we've worked with suppliers to say, hey, here's how you invoice us on a monthly basis through a batch invoice process. So all of those got handled digitally. And we had a lot of questions from people saying, hey, do I create an expense report? Hey, where do I put this invoice? And thankfully, my team was just able to say, you don't have to do anything at all. If you got what you ordered, the process ends.
Wow. That now right there, right there, it tells you the power of the technology. And, I wonder, and we do have some members, there are Fortune 500 companies who have not adopted a source to pay technology yet. And the horror stories that they tell of the pandemic and what they had to do. And it sounds a lot of what you just went through, Zach, on, it was so manual and so much data entering, and so many people didn't know what was going on for months after they started working from home. And for you guys to have your timing, boy, that was brilliant that you were able to launch in January and send everyone home in May and be digitally transformed at the same time.
It was the best real life business case that we didn't submit through the funding process, and I think that that alone has paid for itself.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm sorry, Brian, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, in fairness to Zach, I know he said it was serendipitous, but I think that the truth is, and he's probably being humble, is that we like all organizations are distributed, or especially one that's a national provider like us. We've got people in service offices all over the country. So the intent has always been to be able to create a way that we can manage the distributed purchasing for the types of goods that and services that Zach is talking about. So we happened to run into a situation that really would put us in. We were really well positioned to be able to handle what happened with the pandemic with regard to the purchases that Zach is talking about. I think our goal all along, though, was to create that, not expecting certainly that we'd be in the situation we're in today. And we did get benefit from that. But I think people have enjoyed and have learned how to do it in different parts of the organization that are not, in the home office in Ohio. They're in other parts of the country. And this helps them as well, and will continue to help them going forward.
Yeah, and the fact that you have instant visibility and you can run reports and your executives can see everything, it's incredible. And so I applaud you on your entire journey. So what's next with you and Zycus? And I know there's an app extend for specific needs and features. Are you guys looking at that?
Yeah, I can kind of opine on this one, but for us, certainly, we're looking at the AI offering that Zycus has in a couple of different areas. Contracting and ordering are certainly the two biggest ones. Being able to pull contracts, especially contracts that aren't on our base paper or boilerplate agreements, software agreements that are from other organizations or order forms from other organizations, being able to take vendor paper and run it through an AI program and have them pull out specific areas of risk for us would be very beneficial, save us a lot of time from finding those contracts, having someone open up and read them. So being able to train an AI mechanism to pull that out from vendor paper where we don't know the risks which are associated with our templated contracts is something we're very interested in. On the purchasing side, we have pockets of people that do a lot of repetitive ordering, typically for those service offices or our home office in Ohio that Brian mentioned. So any way where we would be able to save them time from, punching out to a vendor, taking that back, keying in the cost center or GL coding, accounting pieces, anywhere where we could automate that based on previous orders and have it kind of go through with one or two clicks in more of a touchless fashion, and to say if it's below a certain threshold and based on previous approval history that these types of purchases are generally approved, can we bypass an approval? All those things are kind of evaluating in AI. From an app extend, I think this is a wonderful product from Zycus because it allows the core platform to stay, quote unquote, vanilla. I know there's a lot of IT organizations that are trying to unwind some of the things that they've done over the last 10 or 15 years in terms of customizations. So being able to keep the core product, very simple, but then app extend allows them to connect with individual customers on very specific use cases and deploy that specifically for customers, as opposed to creating a functional release and bringing that out for all customers that may or may not have a need for that very specific service through the platform. So we're evaluating that in some of our data space when we pull, motor vehicle records, Is there a way where we can track those purchases, track the types of data that we're purchasing through those catalogs and those libraries of data with these large data providers in a way that we can really use that information more real time?
Yeah, that's great. So, the one thing that everyone told me after the pandemic started was the ability to be able to search contracts for key terms like force majeure, instead of having to physically go through and read contract after contract and look for language and stuff like that. They said using the AI tools and being able to just say, show me all the force majeure contracts out there that we have. And the time savings and the ability to have it so quickly at their fingertips was just huge for so many companies. So I love the fact. Now, Brian, you have described yourself as AI curious, and I love that term. So tell me a little bit more about your feelings there.
Yeah, well, that Zach and I have talked about where we are in line, so to speak, in the organization in terms of the company's digital journey. So not to dive too much into the segments and business we're in, but probably to highlight a really important transformation for us in our small commercial insurance operation. So we are and will continue to operate through a large network, as you mentioned early on, of independent agencies. I think both the agents and the carriers are looking for ways to transact together in a more efficient fashion. And we talk about manual processes in procurement. Boy, we have traditionally a lot of that happening within the insurance operation as well. So a lot of work has happened over the last couple of years as we've gone through. If you take the procurement transformation as a teeny microcosm of what's going on within the segments themselves to become more digital. And so the company's focus and investment as of late, and I think will continue as we go forward, to more digital platforms for purposes of taking submissions in from our agencies in a more digital way and using some of the technology to decision those things, in again, risk-based approach for the things that we're comfortable doing that for. We wouldn't have to have an underwriter more directly involved in, is really where the journey's been. So when I come to sessions like this and join the SIG meetings and go to other industry and kind of affinity groups, and Zach and I, we're always trying to understand how procurement organizations and operations are leveraging AI. The force majeure, use case that you mentioned, we ran through that process a little bit with Zycus too early on to say, hey, let's test this capability to the extent we think we may need it. Let's see if we can use it, and let's try that out. And so, always curious to what the technology can do for us, and what people. And I think for me, based upon the level of complexity we have today and where digital investment is currently at Westfield, it's to really get educated and understand how people are going to leverage AI, whether it's a reality today or not. In some organizations, I think folks will talk about it and they may have the same perspective as me, that they're there to learn. Others are doing more with it. How far along we really are in some cases, I'd like to kind of respectfully challenge that and try to understand if it's worth the investment. So to some degree, I think we have a little bit of a luxury maybe to learn more about how procurement organizations are doing it and take those learnings and bring them into Westfield. I would say we're probably not going to be on the bleeding edge of AI in the supply chain. I mean, we are a 100% indirect shop. We've got a really, I'd like to say, really a talented group of folks in the team that have a lot of industry experience, both in financial services and on the more direct side that, like Zach had talked about, manufacturing and so forth. So it's kind of like a really nice place for us to continue to evolve and learn about ways that we think we can use it and kind of test some of those use cases. Like, are we really ready for this? Or does this AI really solve a problem that we have, or does it not? And so I think we'll continue to step into it. And who knows? Well, who knows what that trajectory looks like, Dawn? Maybe at some point it really takes off, and some of the things that Jack mentioned are things we'll want to implement sooner than later. But yeah, I guess that's maybe the definition of curious, is wondering how it works in other organizations, but being very thoughtful about where we think we need to make investment today versus hanging on and waiting a little bit in certain areas.
Well, Brian, you just gave the perfect AI message for our council, because that's exactly what the AI Council is going to be about. And so I do hope you join us with that. But we formed a partnership with Zycus, as I think I mentioned to you before, to ideate and incubate possible use cases on where we could use AI within procurement. So it's exclusively for sourcing and procurement leaders to come together to say, we've got these kind of problems, can AI work? And then extract the value with AI. And these aren't all just Zycus customers either. They're going to just come in, participate in workshops and forums, come up with ideas, test them out, and some people will adopt them, some people won't, because exactly as you said, they're not maybe the organization's not ready for all of this. So using the Merlin AI, we really hope that we can find some great use cases, solve a lot of problems, and then prove, to a lot of organizations as well, is that AI is really here. It's really trainable. It's really working. And so I'm really excited about the AI Council. So I do hope that because of our conversation that you think about joining the AI Council with some of your peers.
Well, I'm absolutely interested in doing that. I'm sure Zach would be interested as well as we continue to evolve our technology approach. But like you said, I think it's really important to be realistic about what AI can do. And I think every organization's got to consider their culture and the level of complexity that they have in their business process, because I think in that investment, you kind of have to certainly sell yourself on where it works and where it's still a pipe dream.
Exactly.
Council is an excellent way to do it, in my opinion. I think it's exactly what people can leverage when they see it working in practice, and someone can bring more of the reality to the conversation. Because I think, at least from my perspective, over the last couple of years now, it's been more about the possibility, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the reality can bring. The fact that there's a group focused on helping to develop some of those ideas, I think it'll make the rollout and implementation of this much more realistic and faster for people.
Oh, absolutely. Be able to say that XYZ company and ABC and LMG, they're all using this technology and it's working, and we have proof, and we have case studies. It's going to be fantastic to help get other people to believe in it and to be able to sell it to the organization. So
I agree.
Yeah. So Brian and Zach, I'm afraid we're out of time today, but I want to thank you for joining. And I would love to invite you back to the podcast series to get an update on your journey, maybe in a year, sometime next year.
Sounds good to me.
That's listen.
Okay, good. So folks, please make sure that you share this podcast far and wide. I know people are going to want to reach out to Brian and Zach and make them part of their network. Like I said, Brian is so approachable and he's humble, and you'll have nothing but great responses. And Zach, it's been so great getting to know you. You're definitely a rising star in the organization. So thank you for your time today. And thank you to Zycus for bringing us such great podcast host or co-host today with us.
And thanks for having us, Don.
Thanks for having us, Don.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Subscribe to the Sourcing Industry Landscape podcast through iTunes or your favorite podcast app. Want to nominate someone for an interview? Email us at info@sig.org.